Well, welcome, YouTube friends and family, to the first edition of our sourdough series. I'm so excited to be bringing this to you, and I hope you will stay for the entire series. I will put it in a separate playlist so that you can go back and access it if you're not ready to do the sourdough starter or you need to start over and you didn't write it down. So before we get into this, I have a couple things I wanted to say. First and foremost, I want to give full credit to the Needy Homesteader for this method. I learned from her. I learned from her videos. This is not a Kym original in any sort of way. I did check and looked at her channel. She does have some new videos up. Go out, visit her channel. She has a good channel. She doesn't post as often as she used to, but some really interesting things. And tell her Kym from the Needy Homesteader. Oh my word, from the Wellness Homesteader sent you. All right, second thing, I've had a lot of questions, and I should have been clearer when I started talking about making sourdough starter, about the flour and the water. So let's talk first about the flour. So I had suggested raw flour. When you're making sourdough starter, rye flour and whole wheat flour are the two best flours for getting your starter going and active and fermented, because that's what we're doing. We're fermenting the grain in the flour. So I've had questions like, can I use all-purpose flour? Can I use bread flour? And the answer to that is yes, with a caveat that it's a little bit harder because those grains in those two flours are not as easy to ferment. I know people, my mother had sourdough starter that she did with plain old all-purpose flour. His name was Herman. We'll be naming our starters. Haven't named mine yet. And she had shared with me, once we get to the point where we've got a lot of starter, some of her pour off, which I then fed, and I fed it with regular flour. So I think it's doable. I just have the best luck with rye. I have tried rye. I have tried whole wheat. Both of those worked well. I tried all purpose, did not work at all for me. For me. The second question is, why do I have to buy distilled water? Well, the answer to that is you may not have to. So what you're trying to do with your water is avoid any chlorine, because chlorine has a tendency to kill the fermentation or greatly slow down the fermentation process. So questions have been, can you use well water? If there's no chlorine in your well water, you certainly can. I would say filter it first through a Brita, through, whatever kind of filter system that you have, a Berkey. I have a non-Berkey, but a Berkey knockoff that works really well. Then I've had questions, can I use city water? So here's what you need to do in order to know whether you should or should not be using your city water. You can go either online or pick up the phone to your water supplier and find out, pardon me, do they use chlorine? And they do. I can just tell you there's chlorine in it. If it is chlorine, if you take your water ahead of time, filter it, let it sit for 24 hours, you can use that water safely, because chlorine will dissipate in a container in 24 hours. If your water supplier says we use chloramine, it will not dissipate ever. It does not filter out. So it will keep your starter from doing well. So that's why I just use distilled water, but I have used tap water filtered and set out. So I've done both. Especially once my starter gets going, I have fed it just using tap water that's filtered and set. Okay, I hope that clears it up. Now I'm going to be giving you the measurements in grams. Now some of you may say, I don't have a scale and I'm not buying a scale. So I can give you the amounts in non-grams. What I will say to you is getting a sourdough starter started is a pretty exact process. So if you're using a measuring cup instead of weight, you may have a little bit more trouble getting your sourdough starter started, but it's doable because my mom never used a scale and I never fed mine with the scale. So it's definitely doable. All right, so what are we going to need? Let me swing you down here just a little bit. My new ring light thingy is a little bit stiff. So what I have here is my Way scale. And I know it's in sad shape, y'all. You don't have to tell me. And what I would recommend you can use to start with, you can use a pint jar, but I don't have any pints that are wide mouth. Use a wide mouth jar because this combination of flour and water is so sticky that it gets like glue. And if you can get your hand down on the jar, it's so much easier because we'll be changing containers each and every day. So I'm going to turn the scale on. You can do it without the jar. And mine is set to grams. And you usually have a mode button on your scale. So if you just press the button, it'll go from pounds to ounces to grams in most scales. There's also a button that says tare, and that means when you set your jar on and it weighs 284 grams, you simply hit the tare button and you're back to zero. So what are we going to do? Well, my jar is really clean. We're going to start with some flour, and we are going to add 50 grams of flour. So you might be wondering, how much is 50 grams? It's about 1/3 of a cup. So let me get that measured out. Ooh, even the flour smells good. I must be hungry. We're almost there. 46. There we go. 50 grams. A little bit on the rim. Now I'm going to hit the tare button. So the next thing is, I've got a little bit of flour on this scale. Let me grab a cleaning rag here so my measurements are exact. Once your starter gets going, you don't have to be quite as particular on your feeding with your measurements, but I'm trying to do this as exact as I possibly can. So we want 50 grams of water, or 50 milliliters. And let me explain to you what a milliliter is here in just a second. Just a touch over. Yeah, now we're going to play the 1 gram game. Okay, I'm going to call that close enough, 51, because a little bit's going to stick to the cup. You want your water a little bit warm. So if you're able to run it right out of the tap, that's easy to do if you're on well water with no chlorine. I'm going to pop this in the microwave. You want it at about 80 degrees. I will tell you how long it takes. So you just want it to feel warm on your wrist. I do have a thermometer, so you can measure that as well. So I'll be right back. So depending on the wattage of your microwave, the temperature in your house, the temperature of the cup, 10-15 seconds, guys, just take the chill off. Now we're just, this is so simple. It's kind of embarrassing how easy it is. We're just going to add our water in and give it a good stir. So what you're looking for here is no dry pockets, and it's going to be really thick and pasty. I'll show you that in just a minute. That's one of the reasons I like using the wide mouth jar too. I think it's easier to get it mixed up. And even though it's really thick and pasty, it's not going to stay that way, guys, because it's going to start to ferment, and you're going to be amazed as we go through this process. So my plan is to have a video every day, a very short one for the sourdough series, so that we know what to do each day for about 10 days. Now, it's really pasty, but I see here how there's some dry pockets. You want to get that all really good and mixed up. And as your starter starts to ferment, this is way easier because it's much more liquidy. So the first couple of days, a little bit pasty, a little bit challenging. All right. So back to the 50 milliliters of water. Most measuring cups have a cup side and a milliliter size if you're not going to weigh it. So for example, this is a Pyrex cup. This is the cups. Over here is the milliliters. So 50 milliliters, there's 30 milliliters in an ounce. So it's like an ounce and 2/3. It is not a whole bunch of water, that's for sure. But weighing, guys, it really does make a difference. Now let me also say, and my hands are clean. Clean your rim, because like I said, it turns into cement. Now what do? We clean our hand first. Let me take you over to where I'm going to keep my sourdough starter. I want to talk a little bit about your options, why I choose to do it the way I do it, and some of the benefits of sourdough that you might not have thought of. So stay tuned. Change of scenery. So because I know I have an upcoming soap making class to teach, and I'm going to have 7 people in my kitchen, I don't want to take up counter space. So that's why I'm going to do it on my step back cupboard. My house is very cold. Let me just put that out there. That's why I have my jacket on. Oops, I keep forgetting I've got my microphone on. Y'all, I just don't know where these price increases are going to end. I'm going to go off on a little tangent. I got my gas bill yesterday. I heat my home with natural gas. I have a whole house generator that runs once a week that runs on natural gas, and a gas water heater. So, I'm always using gas, basically. But the price that they're charging now for not the gas you use, but getting it to you and maintaining their pipelines is absurd. My delivery charge is twice what my gas usage was. So I had a $135 bill, which I kind of went, oh, but I'll pay it. And I didn't use very much at all. And I keep my house usually at 62 during the day, 58 at night, which I know is cold for some people, but I'm a very warm-blooded person, and I'm usually too hot, and the shacket will get shed once the house is warmed up. But it does not make my sourdough starter happy. So for me, what I have found has worked the best is, I got to do this carefully, a heat mat. So this is just a plant heat mat. And I just find that it makes all the difference in the world in keeping my sourdough starter warm and happy. What if you don't have a heat mat? Sourdough starter is happiest at about 80. Well, my house is never going to be 80. Well, it might be in the summer. So you want to keep it in a dark place, out of drafts, covered, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I finally thought of the name of that dehydrator. It's an Excalibur. I do have a box dehydrator, so you can turn it on to like 80 degrees, for a few minutes and let it get warmed up. Put your sourdough starter in, shut the door, leave it in there, and I'll show you how I'm going to wrap mine. You can put it in your oven with the light on. Just make sure you don't try to preheat your oven. Ask me how I know that. But you do need to keep it covered with something opaque. You could keep it in your microwave. So if it's at a happy temperature, it will do better. That's what I can say about it. So all I'm going to do is take a canning lid. I'm not putting it completely over the top. I'm letting it breathe. I'm going to set it on the heat mat. And then I'm going to take a opaque dish towel, like a terry cloth dish towel, and I'm going to wrap that baby up. That will keep it out of the light. It'll keep it warm. Let's see if I can show you guys. Here you go. So, yeah, not a pretty look for the sideboard, but it definitely works. So you might be wondering, well, what is the advantage of sourdough beyond the fact that you don't have to use yeast? So sourdough really rose in popularity during the pandemic because you could not find yeast, among other things. And it wasn't just toilet paper, y'all. And the other thing that was very difficult to find was bread flour. Oh my word, you can find bread flour anywhere. So what we're actually doing, as I said, is fermenting the grain, and that forms lactic acid and acetic acid. And it is a more digestible form of bread because those acids break down the grains, and not only can you get more vitamins and minerals, it neutralizes something called phytates. I love stuff like this that can make people more gluten intolerant or gluten sensitive. So it just makes it a lot easier to digest. The other really cool thing about sourdough is when you eat bread, it's a carb, your blood sugar is going to go up because that carbohydrate turns to sugar. Well, everything turns to sugar in your blood, but it often causes spikes in your glycemic index. So it makes your blood sugar shoot way up and then come back down. Sourdough, because of the acids from the fermenting, does not spike your glycemic index. So not only do you not get the tummy troubles from the gluten nearly as often, you're not going to have those blood sugar spikes if you're concerned about your blood sugar. So I think it's really cool. Other thing about sourdough is it ages well. Without additives, without preservatives, it doesn't mold as quickly. I have a really hard time even doing the smaller loaves, finishing a loaf of bread. My neighbors probably know on bread baking day to lock their doors. So I'm going to be like, look, I made you bread. It's only half a loaf because I'm going to eat the other half. No, I love making food. I love feeding people. That's part of my love language. So at any rate, so very simple, guys. Like, it's almost embarrassing how simple it is and how many times I've failed at it too. So we will be back tomorrow, same time. Um, we're going to look at how our starter looks and we're going to feed it. And we're going to continue this for um, until our starter's ready. So somewhere between 8 and 10 days. Um, and then we'll start using our pour off because we're not going to keep all of this starter. We're going to pour some off. We'll use our pour off to make a couple things. Now, I don't like pancakes, but I have to tell you, the sourdough pancakes are super, super good with the pour off. You can make flatbread, you can make crackers, you can make pizza crust. So we're not going to be just throwing away our discard once we get to a certain point. Now, we will be discarding some before it's really fully fermented, and you may not want to use that in cooking, but we'll talk about that as we go along. If you have questions about anything I've had to say today, I hope you'll leave me a comment below. I'll do my best to answer you. I may not be a sourdough expert, but I know what has worked for me. And if I don't know the answer, probably one of you do, and you can help out each other. I will see you all again in the morning. More sourdough adventures. I will probably keep the sourdough series videos just to sourdough, but in addition, I may have my regular videos. I'm not sure yet. My back is much better. Thank you all for your thoughts and kind well wishes and prayers. It means the world to me. So I will see you all again tomorrow. But until then, you know what to do. Please smash that like button. Share the video if you know someone who would like to try to make sourdough starter. And until I see you tomorrow, be well, be healthy, be blessed. Take care.